Have you heard of Andrew Tate before?
I get asked about Andrew Tate all the time.
So I'd like to hear your opinion. What has made him so popular?
So many things, mate. Like um, social media, challenges to a crisis of masculinity, like a whole range and I need to contextualize, right? Like, so I think it's important for people to understand some of the stuff that I do. So as an anthropologist, I stepped away from academia in order to share, because I wasn't satisfied with my academic career. It wasn't as meaningful as I had thought it would be. And I wasn't succeeding in it in the way that I wanted to. And so I left academia. I wanted to bring the privilege of my knowledge out into a range of different spaces. Having worked a lot with an Indigenous community in South India who were slaves until quite recently, I looked a lot at inequality. I looked at inequality and structural violence, structural inequality, and how people were able to maintain a sense of themselves and a sense of identity and a sense of purpose in the context of a world that was really quite hard and harsh. I've got a background in youth work, in education, and so I combined my understanding of what it meant to be human from an anthropological perspective with my background in youth work and education, and initially started to work in schools and communities, working with running emotional intelligence, resilience, team building programs for young people in the primary and the secondary schools. That extended into developing, like parental engagement programs with mostly dads and kids because there was a real need for that. I started running rites of passage camps for young teen boys and their dads to help them navigate the challenges of what it meant to be a man in the contemporary world. And that was built on the back of, I was a brown-skinned man in an all boys privileged school. I had a really hard relationship with my dad. It was quite abusive, and I suffered from what I believed to be the impact of toxic masculinity. And it actually it shaped some of my perspectives and choices. And I did things I wasn't proud of that didn't I was wearing a mask of masculinity that didn't reflect the complexity of who I was as a person underneath. So I was dealing with what it meant to be a man. I was dealing with what it meant to be a brown-skinned Australian at a time that was quite racist. And so these things informed some of the programs that I did. They have then extended, and then we did a lot of work with young adults, and then we taught teachers how to do these things. And over time, that extended out into the corporate space where we run similar programs in the corporate world. So I wanted to say that because, I do a lot of work with masculinity. I do a lot of work with disengaged boys. I do a lot of work with schools and communities and corporate organizations who want to address the impact of toxic masculinity to bring about more positive masculinity, but more importantly, bring about more equity and belonging in those organizations and communities around which we can transcend the limiting beliefs of gender, for example, the limiting beliefs of race and ethnicity, and really connecting with each other as humans to maximize our capability within those organizations and cultures and schools and communities. So that's why I get asked about things like Andrew Tate, because people are like, well, how do we solve the Andrew Tate problem? I'm like, well, the majority of men and boys I know are actually really good people. They're kind, they're empathetic, they're sensitive, they're caring, they're responsible. The majority of we don't have things like Me Too or Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson because the world is full of evil, rapey, bad men. What we have is we have like those evil, rapey, bad men are the extreme expression of a culture that we create through normalizing and giving permission to certain behaviors that then give permission to more extreme behaviors higher up. We have a concept of what it means to be a man that is kind of that has been given to us. This idea of this narrative or story of what it means to be a man has been given to us over time, and we've somehow bought into that story, that narrative. We've been sold this narrative about what it means to be a man, and it doesn't serve us anymore. It affects mental health. It affects violence against women, violence against other men. It affects substance use, suicidality, anxiety, depression, and it affects our ability as men to seek help when we need it. And we're at a moment in history where that concept of masculinity is being challenged. I mean, the majority of men I know don't buy into the old school concept of what it means to be a man. but they also don't feel, a lot of men don't feel that they have a viable alternative that they can hold on to and that can give them purpose. They also don't feel that they can actually have robust, brave conversations about what it means to be a man in a safe environment where they don't feel judged or shamed or excluded themselves. And so what I know happens, again, in a space, and we touched on this before, when the status quo and when normalcy is challenged, we tend to leverage or double down on things that give us a sense of stability. And often that is a traditional worldview, a traditional concept of what it means to be a man. And that concept of what it means to be a man that is expounded by people like Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate, that's not a narrative that they created, but it's a narrative that has purchase. It's a narrative that young people are like, well, I don't know what it means, but these guys know what it means. I don't feel comfortable asserting what I think it means to be a man, but these guys do, and that's attractive. And so it creates an attractive, simple solution at a time when young people are incredibly confused, anxious, unstable about what it means to be a man, and don't feel that they have the space to really unpack it. And so where does it come from? Why do these people exist? Again, it's complex.